Hello and welcome to the latest episode of My Granny is Irish. Thank you for all of your comments on last week's podcast. And this week we are joined once again by Nick from the previous, from 2025, which seems, Christmas already seems quite a long time in the past. How was your Christmas, Nick? And a Happy New Year?
Yeah, Happy New Year. Delighted to be back at it now. It was a good break. I kind of, you miss working and something like this at some point over Christmas. You're like, oh my God, what another one? But we had a great time, and no, it's good to be back.
Yeah, I know that normally happens to me. Although I actually really enjoy Christmas this year. It's not my favorite occasion of the year, but I did really enjoy it. I'm not sure, still wondering why. But as you said, you are happy to be back, and you have been keeping a close eye on the papers and the websites. And I think the first story that caught your eye over the weekend, it was in the Journal, where Pascal O'Donoghue, I think I've inserted a no there, Pascal O'Donoghue's decided a while back just to give the World Bank an extra 10 million and 10 million euros, and Sinn Féin have said that this raises serious questions.
Yeah, I think it does raise serious questions. So, the Irish government give the World Bank, tens of millions or over 100 million more recently every year. And the World Bank basically has two types of funds, and they're named quite similarly. They're both basically development funds to go and develop emerging markets, poorer countries and things like that. That's kind of what they say they do. And we gave them 141 million euros last year, and that was a 33% increase on the amount we gave them the previous year. But it had been recommended by the World Bank that Ireland only needed to give a 20% increase, and that had been agreed with all the senior civil servants within the department. But what we're finding out now through FOI requests that some of the team, and I think the Irish Daily Mail and the Journal are leading, is that Pascal Donoghue ran them, his advisors, and said, no, we're going to give the World Bank an extra 10 million euros here.
Yeah.
And some of the language that's coming out in these draft documents is quite funny. It's like, yes, we know that this 10 million is going to be a higher monetary amount, but in the grand scheme of things, when you take Ireland's total budget for the year, it's not that much. And I'm like, yeah. That's not what you mean. It's not that much. Like if you judge any single spending on Ireland's total budget capability, everything is not that much. There is no expense. So he really kind of had to justify this expense, and it wouldn't be such a big issue because other countries are giving the World Bank more money for different reasons. But the reason this is a big issue is because he has gone and gotten an incredibly high-paid job in the World Bank. Only a number of months later. So what we now need to know is at what point was he given that job? Was he in negotiations for that job? And did that timeline cross this award of money from the Irish government?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It is definitely a good investigation by the Journal and the Daily Mail if that's where it's come from. I mean, you are correct in that when public spending, this is just Pascal Donoghue giving an extra 10 million quid of the taxpayers' money when he wasn't asked to. As he said, the numbers were they were asked for 131.4 million and he just decided to give them 141.4 million. And yeah, it's always really easy to say, as you said, it doesn't matter. It's just a 10 million. In this grand scheme of things, it's you're not talking about a lot of money, but it clearly is a lot of money. And if you said that about every sort of overspend or waste, and we know that there's quite a lot of it, you'd be burning through the cash. And the problem here is just, as you said, is whether or not there's a conflict of interest, because he's given this extra 10 million without being asked for it, which I think is bad enough. And then, as you say, and as the Sinn Féin TD said, he then goes to the World Bank, a number of months later, and the the salary for that quoted anyway is £600,000. So that is quite a lot of money. And yeah, I mean, we do need to see things like the timeline. Was he in negotiations? Was he in discussions for this job when he was making the final decision as to how much money to send to the World Bank? I think the other interesting question is, to me, this is actually a really big story. I do it all the time. If it was a story in the UK, I think it would be getting a huge amount of airtime, and I think the lack of airtime is in fact really noticeable. Like it doesn't feature on the Irish Times. I'm not too sure it features on RTE. But I can tell you, if Rishi Sunak went over to the World Bank, having just nodded through an extra 10 million on behalf of the UK taxpayer, this would be, I think, genuinely think that this will get a lot more coverage. Yeah, it doesn't even feature on the RT website. Jessie Buckley getting her Golden Globe is there, and obviously Iran is there, but a possible conflict of interest over Pascal Donoghue, nothing.
Yeah, so you're right. So once again, there are two stories to this story. One is the event itself, and then the other story is the media reaction. So the media have ignored this. This story has been brewing since Pascal took the job. We all knew the amount of money that was given to the World Bank by his department, but we're now just delving into the negotiation aspects of it. So it's kind of drip feeding out. And I called for more scrutiny of this months ago, as did others. But so what's happening now is I think Peadar Tóibín has written to one of the Oireachtas committees to request an appearance by Pascal Donoghue to explain this. And so that creates, a more formal process that the media cannot ignore. And now there is more thread to pull on from the opposition parties. So hopefully Sinn Féin jump on this. I think Independent Ireland, Ken O'Flynn was tweeting about it last night as well. Peadar Tóibín is now animated about it. And so maybe this does become something. And look, maybe Pascal, it was all with the best intentions and there's no conflict here. I don't know. But the point is, it cannot just be to the Irish Times and or whatever, RTE, to ignore this and assume innocence. We want to know the exact details because this is taxpayers' money.
Yeah, no, well, 100%. So let's see, as you said, what momentum can be generated by other TDs to at least, it doesn't even seem that anybody has actually approached Donoghue for a reply. One would have expected that to happen. So perhaps I'm wrong on that. Staying on this issue, you could, as you said, under the usual headline or the usual excuse of 10 million isn't that much. Ireland seems to be one of the few countries in Europe where there is a lot, the tax base is expanding, or at least the tax take is expanding. The base perhaps is shrinking. A story in RT and probably elsewhere that there was 33 billion in corporation taxes paid by companies last year, an increase of 17.2% compared to 2024, which again, mainly due to a surge in payments from multinationals. Now, there's a lot of European countries that would be like to see an increase in 17.2% in the tax take. What is your view of it? Is the tax base too narrow? And if we are bringing in that much corporation tax, why is our income tax so high? Why hasn't there been any cuts to a middle class, say, income tax cut, which I think we had discussed previously? The burden on the middle class is, I think, the second highest in all of the OECD countries.
Yeah, Ireland just is too much money. That is, I often say the problem with Ireland is that money is not the problem, because we can afford to throw so much money at all these problems. If Pascal's paying 10 million extra to the World Bank, so what? We've got 10 million here. If the Arts Council have wasted 10 million or 8 million on an IT project, so what? It doesn't really matter. We can slosh it around the place. And you're right. This is a golden age for Ireland. It should be. but we have nothing to show for it. But
Yeah.
because we have so much money, the government can meander along and they can keep failing upwards. And it's not that bad because, as I say, there's money to throw at problems, but we're not actually fixing anything. So the minute this tax take runs out, if it ever runs out, maybe the tech firms will keep pumping cash for into the future, and that could happen. But we've nothing to show for it. In the Celtic Tiger, we built roads. We built 80,000 houses a year. But at the moment, we're not building anything. We're building a children's hospital, and a lot of people like to give out about that. But I kind of say, like, look, at least we're building it. It might take 5 years
Yeah.
longer, it might take billions, but it's not as bad as the spend on homeless accommodation or things like that, which you actually just have nothing to show for it. So yeah, you're completely right. It was Pascal's budget, the last budget, that gave us nothing. The entry to the higher rate of income tax is still 44,000. Like, how can someone on 44,000 pay the highest rate of income tax? It makes no sense. But yet minimum wage is creeping up. Minimum wage for someone that works 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, is now pretty much 32,000 a year. So 32,000 for a full-time minimum wage worker, and 44,000 to get into to be taxed at the highest rate. That's such a narrow band. It's ridiculous when you tease it out like that. So, like, Ireland, what's the point of all this money? Like, the point of all this money is to make the lives of Irish citizens and Irish workers easier, and that hasn't happened.
Yeah, well, no, you're 100% correct. I mean, you've actually put it very succinctly there. As you said, it's and again, it is easy to give out about the children's hospital, but exactly, if we even had that at the end of it all, at least it's something you can point to, and we assume making the lives of people and families who are in very difficult situations better. But it's the same. It's always, it seems to be a repeated theme. The house building isn't there. The public transport system is still very poor, which has a really big impact, I think, on families and just their day-to-day living, their quality of life is, if you've got an hour commute compared to, say, a 45-minute commute or a 30-minute commute, especially if you're trapped in a car on the M50, it still baffles me how there still isn't, the metro hasn't been built. Dublin Airport must be the only airport in Europe where you cannot leave it to on a you cannot get a train from it. You go to Heathrow and you get to choose between three different lines. And as you said, it's not the lack of funds. There seems to be plenty of that, which gets wasted in various projects. But there's very little to actually point to it. As I said, there's not even a tax cut for the middle class. I mean, are you concerned that I think there was some criticism from the Irish Physical Advisory Council, which I think is the UK equivalent of the OBR, that Ireland is too reliant on this corporate tax base. If something happens and they decide to move, then we won't even have the money.
Yeah, look, we are highly concentrated onto 10 companies to pay for this corporation tax. It's certainly a huge risk, but it just so happens these 10 companies, especially Google, are the best 10 companies in the world. And, Google are only going to keep getting bigger and bigger and better. Like, if you're following, the AI Mag 7 and the hyperscalers, Google are best positioned to dominate into the future. We've Microsoft here as well, who aren't far behind. So look, we've done really well. But what is the policy that has reaped the most rewards and gotten us all this money? What is that policy? That policy is low taxation.
Yeah.
Low taxation creates more money. If you say that if you charge me 10% VAT, okay, I will go out and create more sales that create a bigger pie, which I will be charged 10% on. But at the moment, we're being charged 23%. And it's like the incentive to go out and create transactions, create business, create sales is not there because you're not getting your fair share. I'm not sure if it's called the Laffer curve. It's like where the rate of taxation meet the rate of productivity? And when you look at all the things that Ireland does well, which is aircraft leasing, investment funds, horse breeding, studs, and corporation tax, it's all because of low tax. So why is there not one single party or politician basically calling for lower tax? How are Labour and like the guys on the left? Why do the left believe in high taxation? Like it's the workers that are getting taxed on minimum wage, 3-4% USC on top of their 40 whatever percent income tax. How is nobody trying to come out and say these guys shouldn't be paying more tax? They should be paying a lot less tax. So I come from that point of view, that I'm pro worker, but I'm pro worker paying less money because the money is better in their hands than going through the state. And we can talk about one of the pipelines that goes through it in a minute, through the Arts Council and what they do. Put money in people's hands.
Yeah, well, I think the left like to say, they're only going to tax the rich. Only their definition of rich is probably very different to you or I. I think the problem also is, at least with the left, what you're getting with them. You're getting a high tax and spend regime. But why political parties on the right don't push for lower taxation more is I find really, really baffling. Although perhaps that's being unfair into independent Ireland. I'm not sure what their tax policy actually is. Maybe we'll get them on and ask the question. But as you say, a good example of the state eating up the hard-earned cash of your ordinary middle-class family is the Arts Council, who managed to just forget. I mean, if only we had the option of just forgetting to pay our VAT on whatever house improvement you were doing, or even when you're eating out, because the Arts Council failed to include the cost of VAT when setting out a business case for, of course, an IT project that was ultimately abandoned. So they didn't get their IT project, and they forgot to add on the VAT, which left the taxpayer with a £5.3 million bill. And no doubt we'll again be told that, well, 5.3 million isn't really that much. Why are you getting so upset about it? I tell you, if you forgot to pay your VAT, Nick, a lot more would happen to you than
it's
ending up in the Sunday Times.
Yeah, but it's not just that they didn't pay it. It's that while setting out the business case, they didn't even include it. It actually doesn't matter how much the figure here. It's like, oh my God, you actually just didn't know. How many people stood around and reviewed this proposal for this IT project, which was about 5.8 million, and was like, oh guys, we haven't included VAT here. Or like, what else didn't they include? In many ways, I presume this report was generated before AI was a thing, and they could have popped it into ChatGPT to review it. So in many ways, ChatGPT is going to save these types of people if they have any wherewithal to actually use the thing. But this is just hyper incompetency. Like, it's incredible that someone can get to that level of government function and responsibility and not have the wherewithal to include VAT. And this is why I'm like, stop giving money to the state. Let people hold their own money and do what they want, because the state is completely inefficient. If like left wing is like bigger state. Look, if I believed the Irish state was capable, I'd be like, yeah, let the state do it. But we're seeing time and time again, these guys cannot be trusted to spend our money efficiently. Stop giving it to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right in that the shocking thing is, as you say, just the total lack of competency. But of course, because they ultimately, and this always is the problem with handing over more power to the state or more money to the state, is that if they make a mistake, they are never personally responsible for it, right? Whereas, I mean, I think Thomas Sowell in the United States points this out very well. If you make a mistake, with your finances, or say with your family, you're the one that you are held responsible. You are literally punished in a very tight time frame. Whereas whoever was responsible here at the Arts Council, I didn't, as you said, I just didn't remember to put in the VAT thing when setting out the business case. Do we have to include that? I don't know. I mean, who knows on what basis they're hired in the Arts Council? And like nobody's ever named, right? You never find out who's responsible.
Yeah. Well, no, I say over the last couple of years, the only person in Irish politics to lose their job was Ivan Yates, and he was on
Yeah.
a podcast. Like there's no firings whatsoever. The other story that's coming out in drips is the head of the OPW. I forget his name, but he oversaw the bike shelter, but also saw no repercussions for that. Gave himself a bonus when leaving, and also went on a trip to do a course in France at a cost of 50 grand or something like that. And it's just like these guys they load around the place. They're accountable to nobody, and and they're given enormous amounts of power. And the other one, which we'll just touch on, which is actually a way bigger story because the amount of money here, and that's the Future Ireland Fund. And this is a story in the Business Post this week, where because of our big tax take, right? So the state gets all this money and it holds it, on its balance sheet in different funds for as a sovereign wealth fund. That's the area, that's the direction we're going. So that fund, if it's worth 600 million or a billion, the difference of 1 or 2 percentages in terms of asset class that it's, the strategy that it's put towards is ginormous, literally ginormous. And so what this story is saying is that this money, this 600 million was sitting in a low yield 1% strategy for 6 months longer than it was supposed to. It should have been in a 5 or 7% return strategy, a little bit higher risk, but this ultimately cost the Irish taxpayer hundreds of millions. And it was just purely down to bad management. And again, the theme is the same. Loads of money, no accountability, terrible management, and it's the taxpayer who pays.
Yeah, no, I mean you're right on that. Like I think actually I just scrolled down to the piece in the Times, and I mean I think this sentence arguably really sums it up. The Arts Council and the department did not respond to requests for comment. Just
yeah, but or look at Dee Forbes from the ex head of RT. She never appeared in front of the Oireachtas committee because she was sick.
Yeah,
and like she was earning hundreds of thousands a year and overseeing what was arguably one of the biggest scandals or waste of taxpayers' money and also influence throughout the media. And she never had to say a word. And will Pascal, will he arrive up in front of an Oireachtas committee now that he's been summoned? Probably not.
No, probably not. Look, I'm going to hold you there I was going to hold you on that point in a second in terms of, people, they never seem to have to walk. They never seem to have to resign, which I think is a minimum amount of accountability. I mean, I do like to read the comments on the piece. So you are not alone, Nick, because a commenter there says, aside from the external partners, budgeting without VAT is just shocking. So, I mean, it is true. Look, in terms of the Iraqis, I will say this. I think other people don't like it when I say, other countries, and it is the UK. I'm afraid people tend to walk. Like the head of the BBC had to walk over the editing of the Trump video. Whether or not it was a true edit or how much of it was really fake news. But like they MPs resign if you sort of record an expense wrong that could be 10 quid wrong, you're put under huge amounts of pressure. Like the feeding frenzy is vast. I'm actually waiting to see if one of the chief constables walks over there over another scandal. But they just, in the UK they walk. I suspect in France they walk. And of course they never, a lot of it is down to, first of all, the amount of media pressure they're put under, and then that often then comes from opposition MPs. So it is something structural then in Ireland, both the media and politics, where they just, when people should resign, as a basic sort of decency, you haven't done your job right, or worse, there's been a conflict of interest, or worse again, you're caught fiddling the expenses. They walk in other countries and they just don't seem to, they very, very rarely resign here.
No, dude, I'm trying to think the last there's you can resign from the party, or you can resign
Yeah.
you can resign your seat. Few people have resigned from the party. Famously, Michael McNamara, who's gone on to great things. Pater Tobin, obviously, and he started his own party. There was the Barry Cameron resigned over Golfgate, I think, when he was Minister for Agriculture. And it doesn't happen too often. That's three that I can think of. And it's for some reason, in some respects, if you resign, the electorate respects you, and you will actually guarantee your seat. Thinking about individually, never mind the principle of it, but
well, you have to resign at the right time. I think if you let it go too
yeah,
long, then you're just
There's politics to the whole thing, but yeah, you're right. There is no accountability. There's no force from within these parties to make people resign, because they're clinging to seats. The competition for seats is so hot that
right.
they don't want to concede to the other party on a point of principle, or they just protect their own, which is to the detriment of the voters. And like, we keep voting. Look, it's our own fault. We keep voting people back in. Once you get a seat, it's almost a seat for life now. Like, it's like, and the constant tendency to fail upwards. It's like when you have a
Yes.
massive scandal in Ireland, it's like no publicity is bad publicity. All that publicity of how much of a scandal it was nearly does you a favor, because now everyone knows your name, and sure, Jesus, he mustn't be too bad. It's literally like that.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah. Then you're usually found in some other high paid position. Although that can definitely happen in the UK. That's certainly happened a few times. They just seem to move from CEO from their equivalent, the Arts Council, to somewhere else. Well, look, let's see. I mean, I tell you, no one's going to be walking away from the Arts Council, and whether or not we get an explanation from Pascal Donoghue remains to be seen. You were onto slightly. You were heartened, though, by some Irish talent and then I'm going to talk to you about AI in general at the Young Scientist Award. What did you think of that? Who has won this year?
yeah, so a girl from Kerry, Avian Daly is her name, has won with a very impressive project, where she used AI and machine learning and to focus on a type of brain cancer, and that this brain cancer, in order to detect it, you need to go through multiple MRIs and a whole process. And said that we can use AI to detect it faster. That's basically the 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 bird's eye view of what it does. But it wasn't just her projects. If you look at the runners up, the group runners up, these guys are geniuses. Like
Yeah.
the young scientist competition throws up genuine geniuses in our society. Most of them go on to big jobs, big companies. Obviously, Stripe are now founding it because one of the brothers won it 20 years ago.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to make is that there's so much talent in Ireland. There's so much tech talent, all these STEM subjects, and that there's a move at the moment to create what's called in France the Station F, which is basically a giant incubator startup hub for tech startups and tech talent. And we have a version of this in Ireland, through Enterprise Ireland, the NDRC, Dogpatch Labs, which do get government funding, but it's not jacked up to the level that like it could be. And to the point where when the government ended 2 years ago, coming into that election, the NDRC was shut down, the funding for it. And that's only like the funding is only $1 million a year. Like,
Yeah.
we talk about the waste of the Arts Council and Pascal, 10 million. Like, these guys are operating basically on a shoestring for the potential upside. Like, one of these companies, if they're created in Ireland, can be huge employers, generators of corporate tax, things like that. So I think we should just be leaning into this. The young scientist is brilliant. It should be supported more, but then it shouldn't just be left there. There should be a clear runway or pathway for these talented young people to go into.
Yeah, no, look, it is a great win, and it seems that, as you said, this is from RT. The research involves an AI deep learning model that allows the doctors to predict what genetic mutations are likely to be present from an MRI brain scan. And then the upshot, the benefit being the reducing the reliance on invasive biopsies. Yeah, you
Hmm.
definitely want to avoid brain biopsies. Now, clearly, AI had was really integral to that particular development, and I think Nick, it's fair to say you're pretty pro tech, you're pretty AI, so you're actually the opposite to me. I'm very now terrified of AI phase, and I don't normally. I wasn't terrified of COVID. I'm not particularly terrified about climate change, and for some reason, well, it's also linked to a book that I'm reading. For some reason, I am quite terrified about AI. Are you? Talk me down. Talk me down from the edge. Tell me it's nothing to worry about.
Well, there's lots of doomsday stories out there, and some very intelligent people, um, you know, talk up the doomsday scenarios as well, and say
Yeah,
that this is very this could get out of control. And look, I listen to all of that. I really do. I at the moment I'm listening to more AI podcasts and than any other subject, more than Irish politics, more than Man United or horse racing or whatever else. It's becoming like that because the talent, the amounts of money you can invest in so many of these AI companies through even just through Revolut, and it's very interesting.
yeah,
And then there's the philosophical arguments of like, where's this going, um, and it gets really deep. It gets kind of, it does get spiritual. Like
yes,
the best biologists in the world are now saying that um, there's a difference between complicated systems and complex systems. Biology is complex. We don't understand where life comes from. A computer is complicated, but it's set. Like a computer has a beginning and an end. But AI is now getting to the stage of biology, and it's just fascinating to listen to these guys. So yeah, I take the doomsday scenarios, but I think it's going to be like the invention of electricity for humans. I think it's going to create jobs, create value, create opportunity. I'm very optimistic.
so you're on the optimistic. I mean, there are quite a few who are saying, there should be a moratorium or it just should be shut down completely. That nobody really has any control on it. But you're not at that stage yet, no?
No, because if you shut it down, well, basically Europe has basically shut it down. Like
Okay.
there are no good tech companies in Europe. Maybe Spotify or something. But so it's the race is China versus the US. If the US were to shut it down, the China are just going to keep going. So this is an arms race, and that's the way it's never getting shut down. Both the US government, Chinese know how important this is. This is the space race all over again. So that's not happening. And so it's like, okay, well, who's building it? Who are the gatekeepers? Uh, this could get, in many ways, I think it can could devalue social media an awful lot. It already kind of
Oh,
is, like,
okay.
because it's a lot of my social media feed is just a lot of AI slop. A lot of it's junk. I can see when someone has just blatantly used ChatGPT in such a kind of used it as a blunt hammer. They've just put in an article and they've just copied and pasted. They haven't tailored it to their own.
Yeah.
They haven't drafted it. I see a lot of politicians do that. It's like, man, you've just literally just taken that out of ChatGPT. Like, use it as a tool for your craft. But I then think that more longer form, like YouTube, longer form podcasts, where you definitely know two people are talking to each other, becomes more interesting than what could potentially be, an automated bot on X or Instagram, churning out content, which actually an Irish company, a young Irish company, just got funding for 4 million to go to the US and actually create that kind of bot for advertising on Instagram. So people are, there's huge opportunity here. I was when mobile was being invented, and apps were a thing, I was 18. I wasn't paying attention. I was
Yeah.
busy in college, and now it's like this is like a build out of the internet, and we get to live through it. So it's like, I just think it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think sadly you are. It's probably an age thing. I'm currently in the doom loop. Maybe I'll come out the other side. Are you concerned about jobs at all? I mean, I know you have a very young child, and I have four. Some people are predicting that it's going to wipe out a lot of white collar jobs, middle collar jobs. I'm pretty traditionalist when it comes to education, but when I see my children doing long division by
Yeah.
hand. I'm like, really, they're really still expected to do long division when everyone has a computer or a calculator in their pocket. Are you concerned at all about? I mean, you were a solicitor, obviously by trade. What's the chat?
Yeah,
I'm sure you still pick up the chat. Are they now terrified that they're all going to be out of a job in 10 years, or even the trainees? Can you, like, for instance, can you see Arthur Cox or McCann's or whoever taking on the same number of trainees that they always have in the advent of chat GTP or AI?
Yeah, I think look, Zendesk is a massive company that's in Ireland. It's an American tech company, and they have reduced their workforce from 400 to 200. That came out during the week. So some of these tech companies are reducing. Like, I know Indeed laid off people. Whether for solicitors, yes, maybe, but apparently what I've been reading is that, like, one of the areas that AI will disrupt first is like radiography, and a little bit like the winner of the Young Scientist, because it can read the X-rays so much quicker and better. But
Yes.
what's now happening is that the bar to becoming a radiographer drops, and it's a
Yeah.
but now there are more X-rays happening and more analysis or diagnosis of X-rays happening, and so that
Okay.
creates more radiographers. Access to being a radiographer now doesn't need to be able to study the X-ray fully, and other types of doctors can now do this work. So that's one area that's a good sign. But look, it's going to disrupt certain things. I keep saying, like, go back to the Industrial Revolution. I like to think about this, like, what effect did the Industrial Revolution have on politics or modern society, and basically everything? Like, the Labour Party. Why were labor movements or unions created? Because working conditions as a result of industrialization were so poor.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my head, the way I tease this out, and I haven't heard anyone else think of it like this, but the way I think about it is that, okay, we might not need labor unions going into the future, but we might need something else. We might need data unions, like us as humans. Like, we should be in control of our data, because data
Yeah.
is the more important thing. And there was a story in the news there before Christmas of a guy on Revolut who got scammed on Revolut. I think got 30 grand stolen from his Revolut account, but he had no power to to go to Revolut and ask for that money back, because Revolut basically has no customer service teams. It's all AI chatbots. And in my head, I was trying to think about this. Is like, so that's the modern day consumer of an AI. Revolut is basically a fintech AI banking service, and it's trying to fight for that person's trying to fight for their rights. That's the same as the worker in the factory back in the 1900s or 1800s, and they
Yeah.
unionize. And it's like, how can we gain leverage? So I think labor unions are on the way out. I don't see their
I mean,
purpose.
I think that no, I hear what you're saying. I think the problem then, to me, seems to be that people these days are very poor at organizing. If you're in a factory and the women and children are there also, I think the injustice is there for all to see, right? And you are literally in the room with all of the people you can organize with, whereas if we're so atomized now, we're so individualized. Like, I mean, even this is arguably a good example. I'm here, you're somewhere else, the viewers are all around the country. And I think even that basic of being in the room together is, I mean, there's so little of that now, right? Everybody, getting in a room together is sort of a feat in and of itself. That's an achievement itself. And the problem is you mightn't have the scale, and it's just it's just one dude who lost 30 grand on Revolut, right? I mean, can he? Then it's up to him to organize and find all the other people who have been lost money in Revolut. I think just the mechanics of that sound a lot more difficult because social media has resulted in such an atomization of society.
I actually think it's the opposite, because I think, yes, I agree with you. Like, nobody's in the room physically together. But if I want to create a simple type form with on a website, tell me about Revolut and tell me your experiences about this, and do you want to join my union against, or my movement against, my movement of Revolut users to act as leverage when something goes wrong on Revolut. I think a lot of people would sign up to that. And I think you can reach more people. Like, a single tweet could reach tens of thousands of people straight away. To mobilize and organize physically, very challenging. But to organize and mobilize on digitally is a lot easier.
Does it have the same kind of pressure, though? Like, does it have the same impact? I know people can get cancelled online, and we've all heard of it caused a Twitter outrage, and people have definitely, going back to previously resigned, and people have been cancelled due to online scandal. But I wonder if it generates the same amount of pressure or impact that an old-fashioned organization or union or protest does.
So I think at the moment, right, there is, right in today's papers, there is a movement between certain governments, I think the UK, Canada, and Australia, to ban X. Okay?
Yeah.
So they see the power. They don't want to ban X because X is putting people in bikinis. They are using the bikinis thing to ban X because they know that they're losing to X. And there's one guy who I think is one of the smartest people in the world at the moment, Balaji Srinivasan, his name. He's on X, 1 million followers. He has his own podcast. Definitely listen to it. But he has a book called The Network State. And what his prediction for the next 10 years is, what you'll see is the network versus the state. So the network is X. The network is the Gript community, whatever networks you're on, versus the state, because the state is the old form of network. And when you look for this, you're right. And this is the classic battle of states trying to ban X, the network.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's a form of censorship. The gateholders, the traditional media, and the politicians are pumping out a lot of this. It can be anti-X, anti-Facebook. In fact, now the Online Safety Act in the UK censors some of the comments on my Substack for UK readers.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, and I totally agree with you that certain issues are used as a Trojan horse in terms of, the bikini thing is one example. Just general harms to children is another example for the Online Safety Act, and we have our own Ministry of Truth here. Governments don't like to lose control of the narrative, so there is definitely a censorship push. The censoring of X or the move to ban X being the latest. Do you think this is something that they would? I mean, banning X from the UK would be that would be huge.
Yeah, there could be no argument then what's going on, that the UK is trying to be a totalitarian state or censorship state. At the moment, the figure that goes around is that 12,000 people have been arrested in the UK for comments online. And that's like one of these, we all know that that's true, but it hasn't broken through to mainstream acceptance, because what were the 12,000? Is that a big number? So it's like, it's on the periphery, but like banning X or digital IDs, they're like massive steps.
Yes.
And then there could be no mistake. So look, they're pushing for it, and it is scary. and the other one, the digital currencies and things like that. And at the moment, like digital currencies, when you talk about it, the mainstream don't talk about it because it's nearly conspiratorial to even talk about it. What is it? What do we mean? What that is? Is it good? Is it bad? There are lots of pros and cons, or what could it mean down the road? So look, that's and so when we talk about AI, I the only way I get scared of it is the power of the state to use AI, or
Yes.
a rogue state or a bad state. But the invention itself, um, you know, uh, I think will ultimately be very good. But for every piece of cyber, attacks using AI, there will be, the counterbalance to protect against those attacks powered by AI. So there will be an equaling force. But it, what's happening in Europe at the moment, though, with the Digital Services Act, they've realized that they're never going to innovate their own companies, or anything that do with AI. So it's better to just regulate it. Europe can
Yeah.
literally make more money regulating the innovation than it can actually creating innovation, which is pathetic. It's something
Yeah,
that
well,
just
I think
drives
I
me.
think I think Europe is stagnating. So the industries that they push is regulation. Something's made in America or elsewhere that couldn't be made in Europe because of there's already so many regulations, and then they regulate whatever's coming in. Um, you touched on, or when we were talking about AI, you did say, and I've heard this I've heard this here and there, that some people think there's sort of spiritual aspects to it. Some people think it, could possibly be demonic. There was, speaking of the spiritual, over the weekend, I think the Irish Times, without irony, I think the article was published on the feast of the baptism of our Lord on Sunday. Mary McAleese thinks, Irish families who baptise their children are actually doing them great harm. So Mary never lets us down when it comes to putting a downer on what are usually joyous occasions. Obviously, the baptism of a child is a particularly joyous occasion. So, are you guilty of this great human rights abuse against your son, Nick?
Yeah. So um, I saw this article on Sunday morning as I was going into Mass for a feast of baptism celebration for the 122 babies that had been baptized in Donnybrook Parish that year, or over the last year. So I couldn't believe it. It was like the fact that she
Oh,
would.
they did that on purpose. That it
Yeah,
was
apparently,
timed.
look, I don't go to mass every weekend or anything like that. But I'm not against it. But I am very much pro Christian values, tradition, culture, and all the important things that it gives. So we both agreed. We didn't even have to agree that our son would get baptized. And for Mary McAleese, the ex-president, to say we're denying our son some sort of human right is like performative, uh, woke, human rights activism. Like, what is this? Like, what are you even talking about? And she goes deep into it. Oh, she's canon law and all this. It
Yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
matter whatever your argument is. This is absurd. Okay, it's
Mm.
completely absurd. The Irish Times would even put out a headline that's saying that baptizing your child is a denial of their human rights in a world where there are so many other violations against children. What about the grooming gangs in the UK? What about the
Yeah.
treatment of women in so many countries that we allowed these people to come here and not change their how they treat women or their perception of actual human rights? But human rights as a slippery slope where now everything is a violation of human rights, and it's a dangerous creep because it only impacts on the actual people that are getting abused inside.
Yeah, look, I think, the Irish Times, as I said, I think it is genuinely a form of trolling. I mean, I could sort of imagine them there just putting an article like that out just to annoy the likes of you, me, and others. I mean, what? I mean, unfortunately, Mary McAleese, she's just turned into one of these she is what I would call the ultimate party pooper. She's just quite miserable. She's sort of sitting around, and out of all of the things to get annoyed about, she's going to get annoyed about a family's coming together, putting their phone down even, and celebrating the birth of their child, and also getting that child baptism and welcomed into the Christian family. I mean, it's a bizarre thing to get upset about. It's really bizarre. And not only that, as we know, with baptism, you have godparents. So you're bringing, you're asking other people to help you to raise that child. And I certainly think nowadays, new mothers can find themselves on their own a lot of the time. It is a lot more individualistic, and families. So, I mean, I suspect live near your family, as do I now. But I certainly remember when I wasn't living near my family. And, this again is just another occasion where families can get together and make a promise to help with the raising of a child, which isn't easy these days for all the material benefits I think we now enjoy in 2026. There are certainly a lot of downsides. And here's like the former president sort of, just thinking up ways. It's another downer. You wouldn't want to invite her to any party, because she's exactly the kind of person who'll just start nitpicking whatever you've put together. I just think that she, as you say, there are a lot of other things to organise, but it's to get worried about. But also what I think is deeply worrying is how she wants to interfere with the rights of families to raise their children, within the Christian tradition, and baptism is absolutely critical to that. But I think, it isn't the Irish. I think when the Irish Times get sort of short of copy, they seem to just, turn around to Mary McAleese and ask, can you please write something that will annoy all the Catholics?
But even reading, even entertaining her argument, right? Because she's trying to be relevant. Look, she was president. She had all the country looking at her for however many years she was president, and she's now like, oh, I need to stay relevant. She goes on the Late Show twice a year, and this is just one attempt. So let's actually take the argument. Her argument was that it's a denial of human rights because that you're signing your child up basically for an imposed life membership without sentient consent. If I sign my son up to life membership of Old Belvedere Rugby Club, is that a denial of his human right? Like honestly, that was her argument. It's like, under canon law, this is a membership they can't get out of. It's like, give me a break. Like, nobody. This is.
Do they let you out in Rugby Belvedere? I suspect not.
Yeah, but like, it's just like, it's like. So that's me entertaining the actual argument and fighting back and saying this is ridiculous. But I actually don't even want to. I'm like, this, to do it on that day is a thing. Why not come at circumcision? What about female genital mutilation? Like and all these other like terrible things. But no, like she might have said I'm surprised she didn't say she has white guilt and all that at the end of it as well, because she may as well.
That'll be that's the next article, Nick. That's the next article. Yeah, no, she does have a way, and as you say, the mainstream media still love her. That was it. I think she also referred to Mary, Queen of Scots, who ultimately lost her head over being Catholic, which I think there's a certain level of pride that she would sort of compare herself to Mary, Queen of Scots. Look, it's sort of it's a piece certainly set out to annoy you for sure. Look, there was one final thing I wanted to raise, and I know I didn't raise it before, so I am putting you on the spot. Are you ready for this?
It's ready.
It's another social. You got to really think factually about this, because it looks like Meghan and Harry, they might be coming back this year. They might be going back to the UK this year. Are you excited? No. Might be 2027. Are you excited?
Well, are they taking Prince Andrew's title, or what's going on?
No. I think they're just visiting. The UK media. It's only a visit. Yeah, they still have their titles. You need an act of parliament to strip Harry of his prince title. That's not going to happen. But the UK media do eat this up. I tell you, I only bring it up because well, I have been following it on and off, and you're probably too young, but I tell you that Meghan Markle, she is your nightmare daughter-in-law. If you ever have a daughter, if you see her coming through the door, she is the kind of person that mothers lose sleep over. I mean, if you switch the genders on it, right? If you had if you had a daughter who was made to leave her homeland and her family, right, and her friends, and then hightail it all the way over to the west coast of America and leave his job, people would call that like coercive control. But because Meghan does it, and also runs her ridiculous program on Netflix. What was it called? I assume you didn't watch it either.
No,
well,
no.
if you want to just look at like just absolutely inane content, I think it's something like At Home with Meghan. It amazed me, like they paid her millions for this. Millions.
Yeah, no, I always think Trump's response at a press conference a number of years ago was hilarious. He's like, "Yeah, I've got some advice for Harry. Just good luck. You're going to need it."
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I don't have a huge opinion on her. I've seen clips of podcasts that take the mick out of her and the podcasts that she goes on. So look, I was a big fan of Suits back in the day. That's where she made her break.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But look, at least they're not Prince Andrew. That's all I'll say. It could be worse.
No, well, it could be worse, but I do think it's kind of a sad tale in a way, because he is somebody, it's two brothers who aren't talking to each other, and by all accounts, probably not talking to his father. And I think, in a way, they can seem distant, but I think that reflects when things like that happen in any family. I think it's sad. And as I said, she.
Do you know what's going on with David Beckham? I've just seen headline. I don't understand.
Oh. I've only seen the headlines as well. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, it is sad.
Well, they're the real
I don't know. No, I
don't. They're the real royal family in my eyes. They may as well be it.
I don't know. The son, a break between the mother and the son again, wasn't it?
Is that it? Yeah. But there's a girl involved. It's a very similar story, isn't it?
Now his wife, Nick. Now his wife. Yeah, it is a very similar story. Yeah. So keep a close eye on your little guy. You've only got another like 30 years to go. But I mean, the other story was Gordon Ramsay's. Was it Gordon Ramsay's daughter who married some swimmer? And he also did not even invite his mother. Sorry, now the viewers are wondering, what were we talking about? We've gone from AI to Gordon Ramsay. Yeah, his daughter married some swimmer over there. And she didn't, or he, I think I'm right in this, he didn't invite his mother either to the wedding.
Do you know what this means? Irish politics is missing a sex scandal. That's what it needs. Yeah, it needs to spicing things up. Someone must be doing something. We need this type of gossipy drama back in politics. Ivan Yates kind of gave us a tidbit of kind of this stuff. That's what we need.
Yeah, no, Adam Peaty is this guy. I can't believe any son would not invite his own mother to his wedding. I think it's just... I can't. I'm genuinely sad in terms of sex scandals. No. It's only the Tories. The Tories have the sex scandals. Labour usually have the financial scandals. Oh, those days are gone. When you had the Sun headline that never had any conjunctives, it would just be Tory MP in whatever on sex scandal in desk or something.
But it's since Leo was caught in the club. Kissing some fella, now it's just, that's your private life. You can do what you want.
Well, look, but that is, the thing is, you cannot break those stories now from a media point of view because of privacy laws. Like, it isn't, you were not even born in the 80s, but it isn't the 80s anymore. You can't just, they exist, but they cannot, they cannot run them unless there is a national interest. So only if you're an MP or a TD who's running on a very family values, or say the Irish equivalent Catholic line, and then it turns out that you've been shagging the secretary, that's different. That makes you a hypocrite, and you can break that story. But if you're not running on that basis, then there is no public interest in it. And just satisfying our voyeuristic tendencies, I'm afraid, Nick, does not outweigh their right to privacy.
So, like, I wonder. The point I'm trying to get at is, like, what will it take to, as we said earlier, cause resignations or things like that? And really, what I'm saying is, what is the prediction for, Irish government into 2026? I would say it's going to be as stagnant as ever. There's going to be no change of leaderships, and the can will continue to be kicked down the road.
Well, look, I mean, on a more serious note, like the fact that Micheál Martin didn't resign over his hand-picked presidential nominee, not even passing the first week, I mean, just really sums it up. It would be incredible that level of, again, just the sheer incompetency, or how incompetent he was in terms of handpicking him and forcing out other people, and not resigning when he was clearly totally unsuitable to the job.
But then last week, the Mercosur thing, like, he also then had another major taboo by switching and flip-flopping on there, like, and like that itself is like terrible leadership when someone is like basically on the ropes, but nobody's going to take him down. Literally, there is nobody there within Fianna Fáil. They've done their best. There's a group that wanted to, but they got nowhere. So that he's as safe. He's probably safer now than he's ever been, because he knows that there's no one there to replace him. Unless,
look, there's also something to be said for stability, because running through sort of 4 prime ministers in whatever it was, maybe 6 years, is not necessarily the way to go either. I mean, it hits the markets, if anything else, because markets hate instability. So it can be good viewing, and it makes the papers love it, but it's not necessarily in the country's best interests. Look, I think we leave it there. Nick, it was really great talking to you. And we'll probably get you on next week. I'm glad that you're the positive one in relation to AI, while I stay here in a state of abject panic. Thanks a million, Nick. Take it easy. Bye.